daily Facebook live stream. I'm Bronwyn Pearson. For those who don't know me, I'm from Pinnacle People Solutions, and today starts our 15th week of providing daily Facebook live stream updates for employers and their employees to help you navigate this really challenging COVID-19 time, and to distill the information that's coming at you every 24 hours, try and make sense of it, and also to make sure to provide information and discussion about topics that are particularly relevant during this time. So those topics, we either make a determination are important for because of what might be happening in the economy or with employment law legislation and changes, etc. Or indeed, we have had special requests from our clients as well as from our audience. So very big welcome to everybody who is joining us today, those who've become regulars with us, as well as those that are joining us for the first time. So our company, Pinnacle People Solutions, provides human resource services, advice, support, solutions, the full range to regionally based small to medium enterprises and not-for-profit organisations, and we are here to help you and your business through these particularly challenging times. So yes, my background looks a bit different today. Today I'm coming to you from one of our clients, one of our very special clients, Quirindi RSL Club in Quirindi, New South Wales. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have been partnering with these guys for a few years now. And of course, being a registered club, they've been through some pretty hairy times during COVID, and are just starting to get back. It's an absolute delight to work with them. They're the second biggest employer here in Quirindi, after the council. So it's incredibly important for us to be helping as much as we possibly can to make sure that we can get people back to work and the club back open for its patrons. So delightful to be with you today. We are here live at 9:15 every weekday, and if you're not able to join us live, that's absolutely fine, because these sessions are recorded and they're available afterwards, both in a range of places, Facebook of course, but also on our YouTube channel, on our LinkedIn page, our website. And what I would say is, if you're tuning in live this morning, don't hesitate to use the chat screen. Ask us any questions that you might have as we go along. I'll do my best to answer those. And if I need to take them on notice, I'll make sure to answer them the following day. So outside of this, of course, you can contact myself or my fantastic team anytime, of course, via Facebook, private messenger, email, phone, website. The details are going to be provided, I'm sure, momentarily in the chat screen for you, so you can contact us in whatever form suits you if you want to have a one-on-one conversation about your business and where you're at and what you're thinking. So a couple of changes, breaking news, clarifications, etc., that have come up in the last 24 hours since yesterday, Wednesday the 10th. Just a reminder that the New South Wales State Government $10,000 grants for businesses impacted by COVID-19 has been extended to the 30th of June. That was originally due to close on the 31st of May. So fantastic to see that extended. So please get up there and have a good look, because it's quite possible you might qualify. So have a good look at that. The other thing I also highlighted yesterday were the JobKeeper changes that the Treasurer had announced on Monday, I think it was, relating to the childcare industry, and also making announcements about the fact that the fee-free childcare period will end on the 12th, I think it is, of July. What we've had as clarification since yesterday from the Treasurer and the Finance Minister is that there are no more changes anticipated to JobKeeper until the review of JobKeeper as it's progressing is completed in July. So the anticipation is that there won't be any more announcements about JobKeeper changes until the 23rd of July. Obviously, if that changes, we're here every 24 hours during the weekdays to let you know about that, but that's good to hear, because obviously after the changes were announced for childcare, there was some concern, legitimately so, given the specifications of JobKeeper and the legislation, that the Treasurer could make a decision to change any aspect of it at any time, and he can still do that. But the government have clarified overnight that they don't anticipate making any more substantive changes until the program has been reviewed during July, and nothing announced till the 23rd of July. So watch this space, we'll keep you informed. Obviously, yesterday I mentioned the changes to the childcare sector. So please get in touch with us if you're a childcare centre or a childcare centre worker and you want to know and need to know more about that and how it might impact you. We also highlighted yesterday the changes to the instant asset write-off rules. So there were new rules that came in March to help with COVID. The federal government massively expanded the scope of the instant asset write-off scheme back in March. It was due to finish on the 1st of July, but it has now been extended to the 31st of December. What that means is that businesses making up to $50 million a year can write off purchases up to $30,000, and businesses making up to $500 million a year are allowed to deduct purchases worth up to $150,000. So it's now been remaining in place until the end of this year. The other thing that has also come up, just bear with me a moment while I find the information, overnight is, just one moment, is the changes that, or the opportunity that the New South Wales government has put in place, called the COVID Safe Check for business. So obviously the easing of restrictions has led to a large number of businesses reopening, and as they do, it's recommended that and required that you have a COVID safe plan in place. Now the New South Wales government has launched the online COVID Safe Check, which also includes a COVID Safe Plan template, as well as industry-specific guidelines and materials that can be downloaded for businesses. So you can check, test and promote your COVID Safe credentials by doing that. You'll also be able to display badges on your premises to show that you've been approved as a COVID Safe business. So we will provide you with the link to that. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So that is also something to be aware of that has happened in the last 24 hours. So good to know. Get up there, and if you need help with your COVID Safe template plan, let us know. We're more than happy to help you with that. Okay. So let's have a look today. Today we called the presentation "Managing the Unmanageable." The best way, the right way to deal with staffing issues. And I know that in the last few weeks, as we've been touching on this in the context of other topics, I have made the point probably fairly often that the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept as a business owner or a manager. And it is, we see this time and time again, it is incredibly important for you to deal with any issues of conduct or performance now. Because now, whether it's conduct, and by conduct we're talking about breaches of company policy, dishonesty, criminal behaviour, any other breaches of policy or law. When we're talking about performance, we're talking about great performance in terms of whether you're looking at promotion or reward, but we're also looking at insufficient or unsatisfactory performance, personal grievances that might come through, the need that you might have at some point potentially to demote your staff as a consequence of poor performance. So the aims essentially that we would be looking for for any and all of those situations would be to correct or improve the standard of conduct or performance, to provide an opportunity to correct unacceptable conduct or performance, to make sure that you're treating all of your staff equitably, and to address each case on an individual basis and in a way that's relative to the circumstances. So there is certainly not one size fits all. One of the things that I would say in the context of the discussion this morning around managing poor performance and poor conduct, so managing the unmanageable, and let's face it, we're all human, we all have good days, bad days. We might start off brilliantly and hit rough patches and what have you, but as managers and business owners, we must be on top of that. Otherwise, the very clear message that we're sending to the rest of our team and our clients, believe it or not, particularly if we live and work in regional areas where reputation is everything, and you're probably going to be the last person to hear if people start talking negatively about you as an employer or about your business or its services. It's incredibly important to be on to those things as soon as you note that they become an issue, because everybody will be watching and waiting to see what you do, and you don't want them waiting very long. You want to reaffirm the kind of employment and workplace culture that you desire to have in your business, and one of the best ways you can do that is to get onto these issues as and when they occur. So it's going to sound a bit naff to say this, but taking a step back from where you might be now in terms of dealing or having issues of poor conduct or performance to deal with, is that it all starts, the whole process of making sure that you've got a pretty good chance of not ending up in a situation where you have to deal with these issues is selecting the right people. Beyond selecting the right people, it's establishing your expectations from the very beginning. And that happens really well and comprehensively by a great employment contract, position description, company policies, goals, a really good induction and orientation to your business, managing really effectively during probation. So having a good 6-month probation period and managing your new team member really effectively through that. Having an effective performance management system to manage underperformance, but also to reward high achievers. And also addressing issues as and when they arise, which is what we're here this morning to talk about. So there are a number of tools that you should have in place if you need to address performance or conduct issues. Now, we have helped many clients before deal with these issues in the absence of these things, but I tell you what, if you don't have those issues right now, then my advice would be get on board and get these things in place. You want a performance management checklist, so it's really clear how you need to go about a process. You need a performance and misconduct policy, so it's really clear to your staff exactly what the expectations are and what the process will be if expectations aren't met. You need a really good and robust code of conduct, and you need a good performance appraisal process and a good template that helps you be able to put that in place. So I guess if we move on as intended today to deal with the topic of managing the right ways to deal with staff and deal with difficult situations and really poor conduct or poor performance. It's fair to ask the questions, why don't we confront issues as and when they come up, and what are the consequences of not confronting those issues? So let's have a bit of a look at that. So there are many reasons why we avoid difficult conversations and dealing with conduct and performance issues. The first is fear. Let's just be really open about that, because it isn't fun. Nobody enjoys having to have these conversations. And it's more often than not fear or just a real reluctance to want to have the conversation itself that leads to you keeping it on your to-do list, but thinking that that's the only place that it appears or that it has an impact. It's just something on your list you haven't done yet. Let me tell you, it is spreading like a cancer through your business the longer you leave it, and I promise you that's what's happening. So let's get onto it. Aside from fear, we don't know how to have the conversations and what to say. So really that's often at the heart of beyond fear, why we're reluctant to have the conversations. often we think will make things worse. And again, let's go to a place that we might be a bit uncomfortable with, but it's important we talk about it, and that is we think that the other person mightn't like us anymore. Now, this I find is a particularly sensitive issue for regionally based business, and the reason for that is that more often than not, we have closer than collegial relationships with the people that we work with, and potentially the people that we also employ. We know their families, they might have worked with us for a very long time. We are going to come across them in aisle 3 at Coles or on the other side of the footy pitch, certainly from the 1st of July when we're allowed to get back on the footy pitch. So there is a genuine fear about what the reverberating impacts are going to be about dealing with a poor issue or issues of poor conduct or poor performance. But we've got to move past those things. We first need to identify them, put them out there, acknowledge them, but we also need to deal with them. And I think it's really important for us to be very clear about what happens when we don't say or do anything. So we've talked about why we don't, the fear, the worry that somebody's going to not like us anymore, or it's going to have reverberating impacts on other relationships. We don't know what to say. We think we might make it worse. But here's the reality of what happens when we don't say anything. And the first of those is that poor behaviour or poor performance is deemed acceptable in your workplace. And I promise you that's exactly what the people around the person who's not performing or not conducting themselves appropriately are already thinking. And there's every chance that they've communicated that to loved ones. They've potentially had a chew of the fat on that on a Friday night at the pub over a beer, and had a bit of a bellyache about it and how much they really don't like it and they wish that somebody would do something about it. It can also impact your clients, because in small communities and the kinds of relationships that we have, other people get to know too. So every chance that while you think it's only sitting on your to-do list, that there's a whole lot of people who know about this situation, and it's creating a reputational issue for your business. As I said, impact on other staff is what happens when we don't say anything. Also our client service and our business reputation. All of those things are being impacted without you even realising it. You just think it's on your to-do list. Trust me, it's much wider than that. There's also a significantly higher risk of litigation if you end up terminating somebody's employment or taking corrective action. And I know that small to medium business owners get really nervous about the concept of unfair dismissal. The one they need to get more nervous about is adverse action and a general protections claim, which can be far more expensive and damaging. We've talked about that in another session, but I can certainly add that to the topic list if you'd like that. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of situations where there needed to be action taken in respect of a situation, and you might actually relate to one of these. So the first situation was we had a particular staff member in an organisation who was having regular 9-day fortnights and taking personal carers leave, or what we otherwise know as sick leave, adjacent to annual leave and public holidays, as well as Fridays and Mondays. There were no medical certificates to accompany those absences. Other staff around this person were upset by the absences, but also having to pick up the work, and the team productivity was definitely falling. And so this was this particular situation. So let's have a look at the facts of this particular situation. So obviously, if you are a permanent full-time staff member employed under the National Employment System, so the Fair Work Act, the National Employment Standards, you're entitled under the National Employment Standards to 10 days per annum or part-time pro rata if you're part-time under the National Employment Standards of personal carers leave. Let me be really clear about that though. While you're entitled to 10 paid days per annum, you're only entitled to that leave if you demonstrate your eligibility for it. And I'm saying this to employers as much as I'm saying this to employees. Your employers can request certification. And in fact, you should have a really good leave policy that stipulates exactly what your certification requirements are. As employers, you can also seek independent medical assessment if there's a pattern of absence. You can't terminate someone for illness unless they've had 3 months out of 12 months on personal carers leave. So it's really important to get on and deal with this kind of situation immediately. So in this instance, we're going to cover off the key issues that needed to be addressed in this situation, real life situation, the process to address it, and the risks of taking action versus not taking action. So in terms of the approach, and whether you're in this situation right now or you know someone who is, or you don't want to be, let's be really clear that first and foremost, in terms of how you would approach it, you want to make sure that you follow any policy that you've got in place and that you and your staff are clear on expectations and obligations. This is really critical. I know I say this often in the live streams as the practical realities follow up to after a topic. Make sure you understand your employment obligations and the entitlements that your staff have, and that you've made expectations really, really clear. In this instance, we supported the organisation to review the pattern of absence. We needed to meet with the staff member. We needed to give notice to them that we wanted to meet with them and invite them to bring a support person. We then met with them to discuss the pattern of absence. And we had the option, had we not had a satisfactory kind of explanation or discussion, to seek an independent medical assessment to determine if the health status of that staff member is consistent with their pattern of absence. So that is certainly something that you can do. So in terms of managing absences or patterns of absence, which can often be an issue of conduct or performance or both, there are a number of red flags. One is you must make sure you follow policy and ensure staff are clear on all expectations and obligations. You need to be consistent and fair and be seen to be consistent and fair. You need to, as I keep mentioning every week or every day, most days, you need to document the process. You need to give notice of any meetings you're going to have with your staff and provide support, set expectations and measure the outcomes. You need to set very clear expectations and the outcomes and measure those. You do also need to maintain strict confidentiality and make no assumptions from the outset. Due process is your friend in this and other situations, I promise you. So what are some of the risks of mishandling absenteeism? And that might mean mishandling by not dealing with it at all or not dealing with it properly. Well, the first and foremost is poor morale and performance and productivity issues, not just relating to the person who's got the pattern of absence, but everybody else that comes into contact with them, whether they're your staff or your clients, etc. You could also end up with a claim of discrimination for temporary disability. If you handle this poorly and you make assumptions about the person's absence, which might infer that you think that they might have a medical condition or a temporary disability, you could be up for a claim of discrimination if you don't tread carefully. You could also end up with a claim of bullying or a general protections breach from the Fair Work Commission. You could also end up with a workers' comp claim, and you could also end up with an unfair dismissal claim. And between April last year and April this year, there's been a 45% increase in unfair dismissal claims to the Fair Work Ombudsman. So these are real and present risks. So in this particular situation, as I said, we met with the staff member. We talked to them about their pattern of absence. They could not give us, they were invited to comment on, why the pattern of absence. And beyond that, they were required to provide a certificate for every absence. We didn't have to send them for an independent medical assessment, but that could have been an option if they revealed that they were having health issues that were causing the absences. Anyway, the staff member, interestingly, the team productivity picked up pretty quickly, even though this was handled in the strictest of confidence. The fact that the absence pattern stopped and the rest of the team saw that the productivity went up and the absences stopped means that there were a whole lot of other positive benefits. But there had been a whole lot of negatives before the manager decided to take action, and they'd left it unattended for some time. They'd already lost a couple of staff members as a consequence. So you don't want to find yourself in that situation. The other situation I want to talk to you about is a performance issue. So we had a particular situation that we helped a client with, where there was a history of deteriorating performance. What the manager finally realised was that he also had a disgruntled team, and he started to get customer complaints. So he's now seeing the top of the iceberg. What he doesn't know is, at that point, is that there's a huge issue underneath. So as the supervisor, this person had raised performance concerns, had basically had a customer complaint about this person, had known that the team, had become aware that the team were disgruntled. There was another complaint that happened, and what the supervisor regrettably did was that they raised performance concerns in a heated exchange with the staff member, in front of other staff and at the reception counter. So, you know, not a great situation. What happened as a consequence of that is that the employee lodged a workers' compensation claim the next day for anxiety disorder arising from workplace bullying, and the claim was accepted. Now, the claim was accepted because of the nature in which the supervisor had treated the staff member. It's not that there weren't performance issues, but the manner in which this ended up coming to a head and being handled or not handled, as the case might be, led to a successful workers' comp claim. And the situation nearly bankrupted that business. They had a reasonable sized team, a workers' comp premium of over $30,000 a year, which means that any lost time injury as a consequence of workers' comp impacted their premium. Their premiums went through the roof. It impacted their reputation. It was terrible. So let's have a look at some of the facts associated with a case like that of poor performance. First and foremost, you want to have carefully recruited. As I said right at the beginning, this all starts with making sure that you get the right people, and that is incredibly important. And thank you, Amber. Amber's contributed consistency and equality are very important too, as well as a transparent process. Absolutely. So you want to carefully recruit, but you also want to carefully assess within the 6-month probation period, because during that period, if the person is not suitable, you can terminate. You want to follow due process, very important. You do want to document everything, but you can terminate in that time. And if you've set things up appropriately and you're managing carefully during probation, you can do that in a very straightforward way. You must follow due process in managing performance and providing support and training if necessary. And there is always a defence to a workers' compensation claim of reasonable management action. So we've seen a number of other instances where a manager has commenced lawful and appropriate performance management action in respect of a staff member. They've subsequently put in a workers' comp claim saying that they've been bullied or harassed, and that's been able to be reasonably declined on the basis that the supervisor has taken reasonable management action, that they have not behaved in a way that would constitute bullying and harassment. And reasonable management action is a defence to a workers' compensation claim, but it's only valid if the situation was handled reasonably too. And the situation that we've given as this case study example was a situation where it was not handled reasonably by the supervisor, which led to the successful workers' comp claim. So how do you handle a situation like the one that I described? First and foremost, you need to decide, you know, what are the key issues that actually need to be addressed? What is the process that you're going to go through to address the issues? And what are the risks of the case of taking action versus not taking action? Similar to the first one. So in terms of this particular matter, there had been burbling performance issues for some time. It had created great frustration for the team and for clients. There'd been customer complaints, and the supervisor had words with this staff member before, but had heard the most recent complaint, lost his cool, went off at the person in front of witnesses, and it led to a very costly workers' comp claim that nearly bankrupted the business. First and foremost, for dealing with any performance issues like the one that I've mentioned, or any others for that matter, you want to make sure that you follow policy and that you're clear on your expectations for staff and the process that you're going to be following. This is really critical. it becomes incredibly critical if you end up being challenged on it through the Fair Work Ombudsman or any other lawful jurisdiction. So it becomes incredibly important. So that presupposes that you already have policy and expectations in place. If you don't have good, solid employment contracts, position descriptions, clear expectations for your staff, and a good policy and procedure suite, you need to get that in place urgently. It's really critical. You might want to go back and have a look at the presentation we did a couple of weeks ago on contracts and position description, why bother? Incredibly important reasons why you would bother including these as well. You want to make sure that your staff members' position description is clear on their duties and responsibilities and is very clear in a way that allows you to assess their performance against those duties and responsibilities. It's really important to review the performance concerns. What are the concerns? Where are they coming from? What evidence do you have? It's very important to meet with the staff member, but you need to give notice that you want to have that meeting, what it's about, and invite them to bring a support person. All of this needs to be in writing. You certainly don't want to be going off your chops at a staff member in the reception area in front of witnesses. You want to make an appropriate time, an appropriate place where it's confidential, where it's calm, and where you can go through an appropriate process. At that meeting, you want to discuss the performance concerns. You want to consider the staff members' feedback and any mitigating issues that they might raise with you. So it's often the case that poor performance or conduct can be a consequence of some life circumstance that maybe you're not aware of, that maybe the person needs time or particular support mechanisms to get back to where they would normally be. You also need to establish goals and a time frame for improvement. This is incredibly important because it's not just about talking about the issues and then that's it. You actually need to have goals and a time frame for improvement so that you can continue to monitor the situation. You want to communicate regularly following that first meeting, and you want to document the process and your expectations. And this is critical, particularly if you ultimately terminate the staff member, or you obviously will want to establish a performance history for that person. So if those issues resolve, but you end up with similar issues in 3 months' time, it's going to be incredibly important that you've documented that you've already been down this path and what the consequences and outcomes were. And you also finally need to determine if a performance warning is to be given. And we can help you make a determination about that and also draft all of the relevant correspondence and documents and so forth. Again, that we're not talking a war and peace here, but we are talking about an appropriate process that is documented, fair, equitable, transparent, confidential strictly to the person, and seen to be. All of those things. So some red flags associated with this particular situation that we helped a client with, this performance matter, is first and foremost, get sound advice. If you've got any conduct or performance issues currently which you know you need to deal with, get advice. Very, very important. Establish your expectations up front and communicate regularly. They are going to be the ways in which you can mitigate having to be in this situation at some point. If you do find yourself in the situation of needing to manage one or both of these things, you want to follow policy and be clear on expectations and obligations. That means you want to have expectations and obligations already established in writing, and you want to have a policy suite that is going to help you. Make sure your position descriptions are up to date. They're removable feasts. They should be up to date regularly, every 6 or 12 months. Be consistent, be fair. Document the process, give notice of any meetings, and invite the person to bring a support person with them. Maintain strict confidentiality. That becomes incredibly important, and you need to emphasise that for the staff member as well. And remember that due process is your friend. The way you handle a performance issue is just as important as the issues that you're actually dealing with. And this particular case was a case in point of how it can go terribly wrong. Mishandling performance issues like this one can lead to what we've already articulated in respect of this particular example, poor morale, first and foremost. And here's the thing, if you walk past behaviour and don't address it, whether it's performance related or conduct related, you're sending a very clear message that that behaviour is acceptable. And what's going to happen is one of three things. Your staff members that may not have as strong an ethical compass as you might like will possibly decide that they're going to do something similar. So that pattern of absence I talked about in the first case study, you might find that starts to happen elsewhere in the business as well. Your motivated employees who are really ethically aligned to the values of your business will be demotivated. Their morale will be down. And the ones that are on the high end of that will probably leave, because they'll go, you know what, I don't want to work in an organisation where this is acceptable. I know what you've talked to me about what this organisation's about, its culture, its values, but you're walking past this every day. How can that be the case if you're not dealing with it? So it's incredibly important to deal with these issues. In this particular second case that I gave you, we had a workers' compensation claim. And as I said, if your premium is over $30,000 per annum, it could skyrocket that premium with a successful claim, as it did in this case. You could end up with a claim of bullying or general protections breach to the Fair Work Commission. Indeed, that could have been an angle that this staff member could have taken, given the way that they were spoken to by the supervisor in front of witnesses. Or you could have an unfair dismissal claim if you subsequently decided to terminate. My advice in respect of both of these kinds of situations is get good advice. But get good advice and then get that support to deal with the situation, because the longer you leave it, the more damage it's doing. It's like a cancer through your business, I promise you. And you will only think it's on your list, but trust me, it is much, much wider than that. So give us a call, let's sit down, we can have a no obligation free conversation about the issues as you have them or perceive them and how we can deal with them. Okay, so the practical realities for today: make sure you understand your employment law obligations and make sure your expectations for your staff are really clear, that you understand their entitlements as well. Keep records, put everything in writing. Make sure that you have good relevant policy on conduct, performance, etc. Deal with those issues now and do so lawfully, so get advice to make sure you can do that so you can minimise your risk. Remember, the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept. Make sure that you have good, robust policy and procedures, and if you're unsure about anything that we talked about today, then please give us a call and get some advice. Or if not us, get some specialist advice. It's really important and will certainly help enormously. So that's it from me today. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and whether you're watching this live now or whether you're watching it back again. If you're watching this in either of those contexts and you think it would be really valuable for a colleague or a friend or a family member of yours who might be in this situation, send them the link. Share widely. Very happy for you to do that, and very happy to have a confidential conversation for anybody who might need help in respect of their business. You can contact us on the information that our staff provided in the chat screen. So please join me tomorrow. Tomorrow will be Friday the 12th of June, and tomorrow I'll be talking about what's your new normal, navigating the landmines as they are at the moment during this really unprecedented time. So let's have a look at that tomorrow. Please join us. Invite your colleagues, family and friends to join us also. In the meantime, please hug the people that you can. Wave cheerily at those that you yet can't. Stay safe, stay distant, wash your hands, and we'll really look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us.